Welcome back. It's week 3 of our 4-week conference series for 2020 for the Utah JS Conference. So glad that you're all here with us today. Thank you for joining us this unusual, weird year. I'm resisting the urge to say unprecedented because, quite frankly, that word has been used a lot. Okay, this is week 3 out of our 4-week conference series. If you missed week 1, the miseducation of CSS, week 2, building components at scale, or week 3, well, actually this is week 3, almost got you there, sorry. If you missed the first 2 weeks, you can view any of those videos online still until the end of October. So feel free to go back and watch those. All right, real quick, we have Utah JS merchandise this year. The sales of this year's merchandise goes to funding this conference. We do not have the normal volume that we have in a typical year, so the merchandise sales will help keep this conference going and make sure we can go next year and forever. So please pick that stuff up. There's some really cool stuff on the website. You can see that if you click on Utah JS merchandise link just on the website you're using to view this right now. Okay, this week is sponsored by a company, Auth0. You've probably heard of Auth0. This is a company that provides login infrastructure so that you can add authentication features to your apps. This includes things that are very complex to build, like multi-factor authentication, password reset, and all the security goodness. We want to say thank you to Auth0 for sponsoring this week's talk. All right. This is the third of the fourth week. The talk today is titled Quantity Beats Quality 100 to 0, How to Level Up Quality and Testing by Antti Niittyviita. Antti Niittyviita is the author of the book Story Tools of Testing, and he is a self-proclaimed accidental CEO of a successful business of 45 software testing professionals. Please join me in welcoming Antti in his talk, Quantity Beats Quality. And don't forget, stick around. At the end of the talk, we will have a Q&A session with Antti.
Hello everybody. So my name is Antti Niittyviita, and as you might notice by the name, it's Nordic name. I come from Finland. It's hard to pronounce, so it's Antti Niittyviita. And I have a background in software development and later on software testing and quality assurance. And for the past 10 years, I've had the privilege to work as the CEO and an entrepreneur of a 40-employee software testing company called Prove as well. And in this talk, I want to share with you guys a somewhat personal story from early in my career in quality assurance and software testing. And it starts with a confession. I got fired from my very first test manager's assignment. And here's what happened. I got appointed as the quality assurance, the QA lead or the test manager for a state-of-the-art new kind of a smartphone project. And it was the kind of a smartphone that only had a full screen touchscreen and no buttons at all, and that was something that the world had never seen before. And as I was the young test lead, the QA lead who was out there to prove himself as a professional, I was really intent on working my craft, doing my test manager assignment the right way. So I read all the books that I could get my hands on about quality assurance, software development, team management and stuff like that. And I went all to the trainings and I got the certificates and stuff like that. So I was really keen on proving myself. And in that project, we had this really interesting culture or a goal. We had great KPIs. And for each feature area in quality, we had a KPI of aiming for test case pass rate. So we had these test plans and we had great sheets of long lists of test cases that were supposed to be running for every release candidate. And we had this KPI of test case pass rate. And the goal for each feature area was that we were supposed to be hitting 98% pass rate. And 1 year into the project, where I was doing the test manager's work the right way, we were closing in on the KPIs and everybody was celebrating. But at the same time, the testing team and we had this nagging sensation in the back of our minds that even though our KPIs and the metrics were perfect, something was wrong. The product itself, it had huge amounts of bugs, and the features were literally, some features were unusable. And yet all of the metrics were going upwards and everything was going smoothly by the KPIs that we were measuring. And the turning point in that project came when our CTO came to visit and he wanted a demo out of the project, the product. And there was this one feature that we had created on the product since all of the physical buttons from the front face of the phone were removed. It had this vibrating feedback system that when you tap the screen, it vibrates gently, so it feels like pressing buttons when you type, for example. And the feature was specified the right way as well. The specification said something that the device shall vibrate gently with some kind of a force. I don't recall what the force was. It shall vibrate gently at every event on the screen. And the developers were interpreting that requirement the right way as well. And basically, when the CTO came to visit us and he got his hands on the phone, and the phones nowadays, the modern phones, they have the swipe feature, for example, in the gallery app. And someone said that try the gallery app, and he started swiping. So now when we have this requirement, every event on the screen will have a haptic vibrating feedback. What happens when you swipe? Is there going to be one event or 100 events? You bet 100 events. So when the CTO swiped, the telephone started to vibrate in his hands. And then there was this bug that sometimes the haptic feedback, the vibrating feedback would end up in a eternal loop. So the device ended up in that eternal loop and basically with a in his hands, the CTO was like, oh my God, what? It was just like throwing the telephone on the table, and there in this awkward silence, the telephone was vibrating and the noise was just echoing in the room and turning slowly on the table. And then someone at the end of the table knew how to hardware reset the phone, so she reset the phone. And then the silence was even deeper. The CTO was like, all right, friends, carry on. And then he moved on. It was about 1 month later that the message came to our team that this product development project is going to be terminated and you guys are getting fired. That wasn't my proudest moment. So what was the problem underneath there, since all of the metrics and all of the things were according to the specification? We were doing all the right things, the specifications, the test planning, the metrics and stuff like that, and still the product sucked big time. There was this huge problem that was just simmering under the hood of the whole project, and what was the problem underneath there was the only question that I had when I packed my stuff a few days later and left the office for the final time. Few weeks after the incident, after me packing the stuff and leaving the office, I met with the guy who already had been for a long time in software industry, and he was actually the one who had hired me for my very first trainee assignment as well. And I shared the story with him. And he said to me that it sounds to me, Antti, that the organization where you were was obsessed, just like you were obsessed, in doing things right, at the expense of doing the right things. And that was really, really profound moment for me. And he repeated it. It sounds to me that your organization and you were obsessed about doing things right at the expense of doing the right things. And then he asked me, so what could you have done, Antti, to turn that ship around? Think about that and you may find the next level as a professional when you find the answer. So basically that was the moment for me when the quest for finding answers for this specific question began for me. What could you have done to turn that ship around? A few years later, I became the CEO of my company by accident. We had started the business before the financial crisis, and when the financial crisis in 2008 hit us, basically all of our projects got terminated and we were in deep trouble. The company was only a few weeks away from bankruptcy. And at that moment I became the CEO because I didn't have the skill to say no. So basically that moment when I became the CEO by accident and started to learn all the areas of managing a whole business, about marketing, about sales, about financials, about everything that running a business is about, all the dots started to connect for me, and I found the core reason why I didn't have the skill to save the project from being terminated. So now when I've already been working as a CEO for 11 years, I've had the privilege to meet with over 2,200 people in one-to-one discussions about how to make software projects really work and how to succeed with developing state-of-the-art software products. And of these meetings, I've learned 3 really important lessons that I wish that I could send back in a time machine to the version of me who was starting his first assignment as the test manager or the QA lead. And here are 3 principles that I want to share with you guys as well. So the first principle is called the rule of 7, and it comes from the world of marketing. And actually, before this talk, I started to research on who was the person who originally stated this rule of 7, but I actually couldn't find the reference point. But it's been around in the world of marketing for decades and decades, most likely from the very beginning of the word marketing. And the rule of 7 is really simple. It says that when you want people to take your idea and change their behavior, for example, if you want to sell a product or get someone to take your idea as their own and change their decisions, or for example, change the process of software development, take the idea and make new decisions, they need to be exposed to that idea at least 7 times for the opportunity to change their minds. So people need 7 times of exposing to the new idea to start changing their minds. And the rule of 7 it's really simple. So my problem in that first project, the first problem of course was that I didn't know about the rule of 7. In the project we had 20 stakeholders that were in charge of the feature areas and the process of development as well, and the CTO included. So now when we start to calculate the amount of meetings and moments of influencing the people around me, my peers and bosses, the stakeholders, you can easily calculate I would have to meet all of them 7 times 20. So I would have to have something like 210 meetings for the opportunity for these people to start slowly changing their minds about what are the right things to do here in the project to make it succeed. Basically, I know that I had 10 of these meetings in some kind of retrospects and stuff like that. So my point here is simple. 210 meetings to try to influence the people and sell the idea of doing the right things instead of doing things right. Sell the idea of doing the right things. So my problem was that I didn't have the quantity. I wasn't even close to the amount of that I should have had in changing the organizational mindset about quality. And basically that's why the talk here is named Quantity Beats Quality 100 to 0. Quantity beats quality 100 to 0. So repetition is the mother of all learning, but it's the mother of all leadership and influence as well. So quantity beats quality 100-0. That's the number one principle here, and that's the rule of 7 that you need to remember. Okay, so the principle number 2 is something that I call the slapshot principle, and let me explain why it's called the slapshot principle. I live here in northern Finland, and as you may see from the cameras as well, it's constantly raining in the autumn outside, and it's cold and wet and really like it's not comfortable to be outside. And yet one evening when I was just like staying on the terrace and looking at my dogs playing around there, I heard this strange noise down the streets a few blocks away. I was like clank. I'm not sure if I can beatbox this the right way, but it was like clank. I was like really strange noise was coming from down the street. So I put on my sneakers and left off for a evening walk. And what I found there at the end of the street, few blocks away, was this young guy who had dragged a old battered ice hockey goal on the street and a plywood sheet. I'm not really sure if it's called plywood sheet. Well, it was like a thin layer of plywood there on the street. And he had this huge bucket full of hockey pucks. And he was doing ice hockey shots into the battered old goal there. And he was like doing a shot after another, even though it was raining outside. I was like, wow, that's something that he really works on his practice, I was thinking about when I was passing him by. Then on the next day, I noticed that there was this same noise down the street. He was again practicing his slap shots. And when I've started to observe this dude, it has turned out that every night at some point of the evening, the guy comes on the street, drags the old battered goal on the street as well. And even if it rains or hails, or even if it's a beautiful day and all the friends go out on their journeys to skateboarding and stuff like that, every day he comes out and does his hockey shot practice before he leaves off. Now, you don't really have to be a genius. You can be an engineer like I am as well, to be able to see that out of all of the younglings, or basically the people who live here where I live, out of all of them, who has the greatest shot, who has the greatest chance of actually playing a professional ice hockey when they grow up. So if quantity beats quality 100-0, quality then is a byproduct of taking care of the quantity first. So that's what the slapshot principle is all about. The number 1 key was the rule of 7. Number 2 was the slapshot principle, and then comes the number 3. Because now you may ask that in your first test manager assignment, you were obsessed about doing things right at the expense of doing the right things. What if you are practicing the wrong things? So that's the critical question here, and that's what the third principle is all about. So of course, this is a principle that I call the feedback looping. So of course you need to be observing what you're getting with your practice. I'm sure this dude will become great at slap shots if he only practices them every day, day in and day out. But if he doesn't have a great coach as well, who gives him feedback on doing the work, he won't have that chance of becoming the professional he wants to be. So that's what's called feedback looping. And you can take this idea, this feedback looping idea, for example, into a domain of professional software development. Here's an example quickly. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember what you were doing 2 weeks away at this specific time and date? So where were you and what you were doing? Now it's a great time to shake your head, unless of course you remember. On one workshop we had this dude who said that I was in a dentist's appointment and he was doing this root canal operation for me. It was terrible. I was like, yes, of course you can remember what you were doing if you were really, really emotionally engaged. But if it was business as usual for you, you probably won't remember the things that took place 2 weeks ago at this specific date and time. And here's the problem with software development as well. If I as a software developer write lines of code now and then commit them into the version control and then someone finds a bug 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now from what I did by the means of software testing or customer feedback or whatever it is, and the bug report comes to me, how likely is it that I'm going to remember what lines of code I was changing and what were the dependencies? And think about the situation. If I don't remember, will it take more or less time for me to fix that bug? Of course it will take more time to find the lines of code that I was changing and caused the bug, caused the problem, caused the error. And in addition to that, losing my ability to speak here, and in addition to that, I don't remember the dependencies as the coder. So the fix that I'm doing for the bug now is likely to break something else somewhere else. So basically, if the feedback loop is too long between the development and testing, this causes the problem in development because fixing bugs is slower and more prone to errors, so it's more risky. And basically, if you create a fast feedback loop in development by the means of basically, for example, test automation and fast way of exploratory testing, if you can create a fast feedback loop in development, that's something that creates a steep learning curve for the developers. Fixing is faster because they remember what they were doing, and the dependencies won't be breaking because they still remember what they were at the time of work. So to quickly wrap up, the rule of 7. The rule of 7. Calculate the number of stakeholders, multiply it with 7, and then you have the number of influencing moments that you need to have in order to slowly start to steer the ship into a new direction. Quantity beats quality 100 to 0. Number 2 principle, the slapshot principle. Of course, if quantity beats quality 100 to 0, quality is a byproduct of fixing the quantity first. Remember, practice is something that improves your skills. But then, if you're doing the things the right way at the expense of doing the right things, there is a risk. And that is why you need the third principle, the fast feedback looping. And then you have a full circle of actually getting to the next level in whatever you do, from software projects into professional brand creation, whatever you like. So those are the 3 ingredients. And now let me leave you with one question. But before we do that, out of these journeys into being the CEO and out of getting fired of the project, last summer I wrote a book about it. And about the book, that was something that I wanted to give myself on that first assignment as a tool to help steer the ship into a new direction. And that book eventually became the Story Tools of Testing. Let me show it to you guys. This is a little bit of an ad, I know. Story Tools of Testing is this book. And now for this conference, I have set up a discount, 50% discount, if you want to get your hands on this book. And I promise the content here will be epic. If you have ever felt frustrated by your clients, colleagues or bosses and why they don't get your ideas, so this is a tool for you to get your ideas across and make it stick. So the ideas here and the tools here will be epic for that purpose. So 50% discount is available. for the remainder of this conference at a domain called, at the URL called prove.guru/thebook. Prove.guru/thebook. So go check it out and get your hands on the book. This is going to be epic. There is an audiobook, hardcover book, although there aren't many copies more left of it. And then, of course, there is the ebook that you can instantly start enjoying. But the question that I promised to you guys, the question that I wanted to leave you with is really, really simple. If practice is something that you need to be doing to get to the next level with the quality, what are the 100 hockey shots a night that you should be doing now? What are your 100 hockey shots? Thank you guys. And I see you on the QA right after the talk. Bye bye.
Thank you, Antti, for that talk. I learned some very interesting things from you. And now I would like to ask you a few questions.
Sure, go ahead. Hit me with the best ones.
Okay, here we go. The first question is, what is something that you practice through repetition?
It does change, like every year a little bit. But one of the things that after the incident when I got fired from the project has been a really big deal in my career, both as the entrepreneur and a software testing professional. And that's been the skill of explaining the hard topics of testing to clients, colleagues, and bosses in a way that it would stick, in a way that I would get them on my side. And that's one practice that my goal is to have at least one discussion with someone who doesn't understand testing yet every day. And sometimes in these Corona times, it has to be online on Zoom or Google Meet, or maybe even a chat on LinkedIn if nothing else happens to pop up for me. So I aim at having a conversation with someone who doesn't understand testing yet in a way that they would take something away from it. And since I've been doing this, been working on this goal for quite some time, it has turned out to become something like 2,000. And it's actually already, I started to calculate 2,400 one-to-one sessions with people about how to create epic products and how to succeed in software development in general. So that's one one-to-one discussions with people. It's beneficial for networking purposes, but it teaches me to explain topics of testing. So that's one thing. Yeah.
That's great.
And then of course I try to do software testing every day a little bit. Like, just to practice my questioning mind and find something interesting, find bugs from somewhere. Fortnite has been one of my favorites with my son. So he's 9 years old. We've been playing that. So there are interesting stuff there.
Nice. One of the phrases you used really struck me, which is doing the right things over doing things right. And yeah. I want to ask, how do you know if your current focus is on doing things right versus doing the right things?
I've noticed that quite often, especially I've noticed it during the Corona epidemic, the first wave here in Finland, since the officials, they were obsessed in trying to do things right in the beginning, and they were horribly late in dealing with the wave of the infection. And since they were horribly late, it turned out to be quite a mess here in Finland. So the first problem with people is that they obsess about doing the right thing, and they obsess about it for too long, and it impairs their ability to get moving. So the first thing to do is to actually get moving, to do something to get results. And then of course you need to have like the ability to observe what you're getting, since it may be that you are doing wrong things. So who knows, but the only way to find out is to actually get moving and to observe what you're getting. So that's the first way to do it. And of course, for example, when I've been doing these one-to-one sessions, meeting people as part of my practice, one of the things that I've been doing like for the past few years is that I immediately send a feedback form not everybody feels it, but a few questions that was it valuable to have this discussion and ask a little bit of feedback. So I'll send them a few questions, 3 to 5 questions, and was it valuable? What did you get from it? And then do you probably want to meet again and stuff like that? So asking for feedback is a great way to calibrate if you're doing the right things or not. And of course, like in the example of the ice hockey dude here in my down the street. So in his example, coach could do the same. Coach could guide you to a right direction. He sees the flaws and he guides you to practice the right things next. So it's all about calibrating the plan and seeing what you're getting. And it's basically it's like a cycle. So do something, observe what you're getting, adjust, and then do something, and then observe what you're getting and adjust. So basically that's my system of doing it. I think there is no silver bullet to it. People may have different approaches, but I like to get moving quite fast. That's one of the reasons I love Nike products. I have lots of Nike sneakers down in my closet because the slogan is just epic, just do it. So get moving and start doing something, and then observe what you're getting.
Nice. All right, thanks. Next question. In the example of the vibrating phone, it appears that your team was misled by something I've heard called proxy metrics. Proxy metric is something that measures indirectly the thing you're trying to achieve.
It's almost like a stuntman in a movie. So it's not quite the real thing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. So in your experience, how do you find the right metrics?
I believe that there aren't right metrics in anything. It's like if you think about specifying something, there is absolutely no way to exhaustively specify, for example, what a room is in a way that it would perfectly describe the room. And in that sense, you only understand what the room is when you are standing in one and you are experiencing it. So no amount of specification can describe the room perfectly. And that's the same problem with metrics as well. No amount of designing metrics or choosing ones can perfectly describe what the reality is. And that's basically with every metric that's a problem. And what I always say when this question comes up in these one-to-one meetings or wherever I go, I do testing workshops, for example, and people ask about the metrics and finding the right ones. I say that choose one, and when you are observing the metrics, it always needs to be paired up with a story. So the metrics are like, it's a pair. Metrics is the content, and then you will need the context for it. And for example, in my project with the touchscreen phone, we had this KPI of hitting 98% pass rate with the specified amount of test cases. So basically what the metric said is that these specific test cases are passing with a 98% pass rate. So when you're measuring that pass rate on those specific test cases, then you know that 98% of these features that are tested by these specific tests are passing, but it's not a sign of having a bug-free product. So you can have any amount of test cases, but it's never a sign that there are no new bugs to be found. So that needs to be kept in mind if you're measuring things like test case, pass rates, or whatever you do. So it's all about pairing the metric with the story behind it. So understanding the context where the metric is used. So that's really important. And that's why I always say that these ideas, they always should be like explained, and testers and software development professionals as well should learn to explain the hard topic to their bosses and clients and peers as well. So I noticed that I'm using as well a lot. I might substitute it with something else. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, next question. How would you respond to someone saying that it is more important to deliver more features and that we don't have time for testing?
Can you repeat the question? Deliver more features?
Yeah, so the idea is that some teams say it's more important for our business to deliver new features, to build things, than it is
Yeah.
to spend time writing tests.
Yeah, and that's an interesting like point of view. And I heard that there was this idea of writing tests. So basically, testing is a concept like an umbrella. It hides very different, a lot of different kinds of activities underneath it. And I have this one like it's a one-liner. Testing is a sum total of two different activities, and I'll try to explain it in a short enough moment here. So, have you been to a forest?
Sure.
Like picking berries, for example. Yeah, most people have. So that's why it's an easy question to answer. When you go out to a forest to pick berries, there are two options to choose from in the domain of testing. So if I was a traditional software tester, quality assurance specialist going to pick the berries, I would jump out of my car and open the map and design a perfect route through the forest to pick those berries. And then after I've done the planning, writing the test case, I would just start executing and go out to the specific, like the route, and pick the berries that I find. But then comes the question, what happens to the amount of berries that you get when you go to the forest the second time? For example, in the next week, and you have a great plan and you start executing. Will there be more or less berries in your bucket when you're done? You can answer the question.
Well, I mean, same route, fewer berries.
Yeah, fewer berries, exactly. And that's the problem. That's the first problem that many organizations face when they think about testing. That testing needs to be written and specified, like really. And that's what we did in the smartphone project as well. The problem was that we spent most of our time writing and executing tests. And when you reuse those tests, you find less berries. And the only solution, of course, is to put all your experience as a berry picker and a forest goer into the play and go explore the forest. And that's an unplanned process of executing the berry picking. So thinking about the berry picking, there are two ways to do it. You can go checking the routes that you have planned, or you can go exploring or hunting for the berries. So basically, that's why I say that testing is a sum total of two very different kinds of activities, and they are checking and hunting. And basically, if you can repeat the question, then we can use this one a little bit more.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about exploratory testing versus regression testing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think the question here is more about writing automated tests.
Exactly. And then this checking part of the work, it can be regression testing, whatever it is, you can automate them. That's exactly true. And writing test cases, you can think about them as manual test cases, manually executed, or tests that are executed by a robot. so it basically makes no difference. It always consumes time, and the yield is diminishing. So if you have a very narrow span of time at your disposal, where do you want to invest it now? That's the most important question. Do you want to invest that small amount of time and resource to writing tests with diminishing returns, or exploring and finding new harvest? So it's always a choice, and that's why I call it the choice of time. Time is always the choice. I've only met one project that had basically an unlimited amount of time and money for their disposal for quality assurance. It was in aviation, and it was like airplanes are going to crash and people are going to horribly die if we don't do the quality assurance the right way and do all of the stuff, not just specifically only the right things, but all of the stuff. So they had something like 400,000 euros or dollars for every 100,000 of development money they had. So it was like 4-to-1 ratio. But for the rest of us, if you have a limited amount of time and money at your disposal, where do you want to invest it right now? That's the most critical question.
Cool.
But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Am I even touching the question?
I think Yeah, I mean, I think this question has more to do with development teams that are getting pressure from the business to build new functionality.
Hmm.
And the
Yeah,
developers themselves are saying, we want to write automated testing.
yeah,
And the business is saying, no, no time for that. We need more features to sell, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I get it. Yeah, yeah. It's the choice of time in development as well. I've been working as software developer myself, so I know that pain. I would love to be able to do high standard, high quality stuff when I'm coding, and then there is always the deadline, the pressure from the organization. So yeah, I have no silver bullet for that one, except for identifying the stakeholders that are behind the idea of just do it and do it fast and take care of the testing later if at all. So identifying the stakeholders and you know, 1-to-1, you know, the rule of 7, quantity beats quality 100 to 0. It will require a lot of leadership and influencing skills from the developer or a software, whoever it is. It will need a lot of influence and skills to incept the idea that investing in quality right now will pay off later handsomely. And one of a great book recommendation for this purpose is it's written by Dan Heath, if I recall correctly, and it's quite new book. It's called Upstream: How to Solve Problems Before They Become Problems. And it's all about how to swim upstream to solve the problem that's causing the water to be polluted downstream. So yeah, there is no silver bullet except for taking the hat of being the champion of your cause of quality and just start meeting the right people and influencing them and stuff like that. So that's the only way that I found out to be applicable in these kinds of situations.
Cool. All right, next question.
Quite a long story for a short question. So.
Yeah. All right, next question. So going back to the example of the vibrating phone again, looking back now at your experience, what would you have done differently? For example, what meetings would you have had and what would you have said in those meetings?
I think the most important idea that looking back, my organization, the bosses, and some of my colleagues even, didn't quite get or understand at the time was that testing is and quality assurance is a sum total of two very different kinds of activities, namely checking that can be automated and hunting, the exploring and going to gather the berries from the forest. And as you might now, if you reflect back on the story, most of the stuff that we did in our quality assurance process there was around checking. And I remember the turning point for myself was when one of our product owners from one feature area stormed into the room and he was like, "Whoa, we are having great trouble and it's like everything's breaking down. I was using the actual device here and we have huge amounts of bugs. I was reporting 19 bugs from just this morning. How come have you not found the bugs yet?" And I'm sorry, I'm shouting here, but he was really like aggressive. And the only thing that I had at that moment was that, hey, we've been obsessing about these test cases and our test scripts. We haven't had time to go find those bugs that you found. And then the moment passed, situation passed. So the idea was, it wasn't like incepted into the minds of our bosses and our organization that testing is a sum total of two activities. If you want to find the bugs before the release, you need to go explore the forest as well, and then automate the checking as far as possible.
Cool. All right, so now we're going to dive into kind of the unit test, automated testing with this question. So in my experience, the so-called best practices of software testing change very frequently. In fact, I would say that in my experience, these practices change more frequently than anything else in an industry that already sees a lot of churn and change. I see this at two levels. At the industry level, we see best practices that change a lot, but also within teams, they'll be constantly reaching for different tools, saying, "Oh, those tests that we wrote 6 months ago are bad. Here's a new way to do it." We tend to do testing wrong so often, and only find out months later that the tests turn out to actually constrain us. How do I reconcile the notion that quantity beats quality 100 to 0? If I write a huge quantity of tests, but they all prove to be harmful?
Oh, that's a great one. When you're writing tests and this idea quantity beats quality doesn't apply to the amount of tests that you have, but when you're writing, the more you write the tests, the more you should be able to learn from it, learn from the process. So quantity beats quality in that sense. So it all comes back to the first original questions that I remember you asking, and you need to be able to observe if the tests that you're writing are actually producing valuable information to the team, to yourself, or to the organization. And I love the idea of discarding. So there should be a low threshold of discarding things that don't serve us anymore. And at the same time, adding things that will serve us in terms of where we want to be. So that's why I always say that begin with the end in mind. So basically, the quantity beats quality idea here is all about learning which practices are most valuable for us at the moment, and then trying to find the feedback and doing something, getting the feedback, and then adjusting. So that's all about the idea here. So yeah, you're right. The ever-growing number of test cases takes us nowhere usually. But the process of writing them is really important in terms of learning. And I've noticed that when you're writing tests, basically on any level, the learning curve is great. And at the same time, I've noticed that while you're writing, it's an exploratory process. That's a way of going to explore the forest. And while we're writing the tests on the UI level, on integration level, or the unit test level, I've noticed that people find a lot of bugs during the process of writing tests. So that's a valuable tool. The process of writing them is even more valuable than the tests themselves. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, in my opinion. So
cool, thanks. All right, so final question. This is a kind of a devil's advocate, skeptical question. So
I love them.
I hear analogies a lot. Your hockey analogy is right in this category. We hear analogies about music practice, analogies about sports, and other practice. But these practice routines are training your body and your mind to repeat the exact same action over and over. But in software development, most problems we encounter tend to be new. They're not problems we've seen before. In other words, we're not just hitting the hockey puck again into the same goal from the same place. And maybe there are shared elements between problems that we encounter in software development, but generally it's not like hockey, in that way. Of course, we all acknowledge that practice and experience are helpful, but isn't this analogy a little bit wrong to compare to software development?
Yes, it can be wrong to compare in software development. One reason why it might be wrong is that software development as well as testing is heavily a creative process. And creative processes aren't as structured as, for example, archery or hitting the hockey puck, So there is a huge difference in creating process and when compared to sports, for example. And at the same time, I was actually just a few weeks ago, I watched a Netflix documentary about Bill Gates. And he's famous for the amounts of reading that he does. And what he says that the more that you read, the faster it gets. And the reason why it's faster is that it has no difference how fast your eyes are moving on the lines, but the reason why it's faster is that you have a structure in your mind for all the information that you are reading in a new book. and it's already familiar, and that in that way it becomes faster and faster and faster the more you read, because you can just drop the stuff that you're learning into the structure that you have in your mind. And in that sense, creative process, it has a context, it has a structure that in your mind. And most people who do creative work have never bothered to investigate and to research how the creative process works in the mind, how the problem solving works there. And that's why I love TED conferences, because they are a mix of technical stuff and the creative stuff and the business stuff. And those kinds of conferences are just epic for me, because it's like a party in my mind, and it creates new kinds of connections in whatever I do, and it creates a structure in the mind that helps me to solve the technical kinds of issues as well. So that's why I say that the structure is really, really important in the creative process as well. And I'm using that as well again, like way too often, and now I'm making a point of it. So bear with me, guys. So yeah, the creative process has the structure, and the structure is something that this quantity beats quality idea is. It builds the structure, but it only builds a useful structure if you introduce the feedback loops as well. So you need them both. You need to observe what you're getting. So in that sense, that's why I feel the quantity beats quality is an important concept, and it's useful. It's been useful for me in creative work too.
Great, got it. Yeah, it sounds like deliberate practice for creative activities is a little bit more complicated.
Exactly, it is more complicated, but that's the reason why we developers, we software industry people, we are complicated people, I would say, and we are here for a reason. We love complicated stuff, and that's why the creative process is something that it really excites me, like intellectually, and it's a delicate combination of the algorithm ideas, and then just like deterministic process, and then there is the creative stuff that you're getting some kind of transmissions from the space or whatever it is. so I love the combination of them both, and that's why I love software industry so much.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Antti, for your time. Thank you for your talk and for your answers today. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I live here in Finland, so I'm far away. But the easiest way I would say is through the social media. And on my talk there was like my name, the handle. It was at Niittyviita. But I probably have to write it because it's pretty hard to pronounce. So just bear with me, guys. I'm doing it right now, so I'll show it to you. This is it. So this is my only slide for the presentation. Can you see it?
Yes. Thank you.
Probably a little bit. So this is the handle you can use to find me. You can find me even on TikTok. So it's great to find me there. Go get me and send me some kind of a message or a connection request. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. It was a pleasure to join your conference, and just epic questions that you had there. Thank you.
Great.